Good morning. Firstly, I'd like to thank SmartestEnergy for the kind offer to come and talk to you about one of my favourite projects. And it also makes the change to get out of the house. I'm Lee Preston, Sustainability Lead in Group Property at Aviva. I'm responsible for purchasing, monitoring and reducing energy and water consumed in our operational buildings. Several years ago, we committed to reduce our direct emissions in 2030 by 70%. And as mentioned, I was pleased to report we actually smashed that target back in 2020. I know you're going to say the pandemic must have played a big part in that, but in 2019, we achieved a 66% reduction, and we're on track to hit the target in normal conditions. However, no time to rest. In March this year, the old target was quickly superseded, with the Mammoth Challenge to become operationally net zero by 2030. I joined the group 7 years ago and have three main priorities. Firstly, use less with laser focus on energy efficiency. Secondly, buy well. Make sure we buy the cleanest electricity at the right time and also the right technology at the right time as well. And finally, generate on site. A bit of a purist view, but we can generate at point of use, and this makes the most sense to me. And this brings me on to an exemplar piece of work and our first net zero building in Norwich. Next slide, please. Horizon was constructed about 17 years ago and used as a dedicated call centre, meaning the building was intensely occupied and run extensively 7 days a week, unlike our normal offices, which are 5 day a week operations. So priority number one, use less. As you can see, when we look back at pre-COVID times in 2010, we consumed circa 2 million kilowatt hours. And by focusing on energy conservation measures, we have made a significant reduction. Would have been nice to achieve around number like 50%, but 46% was a great result for us. We achieved this through several concepts, from no cost opportunities, such as compressing plant operation times, ensuring we only cool and heat space when needed, and by running switch-off campaigns where our colleagues can contribute and ensure devices are off. We made sure to have full sight of when and where we are using energy, using sub-metering, as mentioned before as well, and out-of-hours audits to hunt out inefficiencies. We were smart by ring-fencing savings and using them to help fund larger change projects, such as converting all our lighting to LED and making each luminaire sensitive to movement, daylight, and programmable. So the lighting would actually follow people around the building. We also retrofitted variable speed drives onto our pumps and air handling fans. You can hear the fans in here whirling away. We actually made sure that they could be turned down if areas were unoccupied. We then wanted to squeeze more savings and partnered up with Carbon Intelligence to run a smart building optimization program. For want of a better phrase, we ran a full MRI scan on the building, and this checks and monitors thousands of points from air handling fan speeds to the temperature of water circulating in the cooling systems. The system uses AI to present opportunities and continually test our thinking. And with this insight and brilliant collaboration between our site engineering teams, BMS providers, and Carbon Intelligence, we were able to make big instant savings, but also make them stick. Hence, reducing the consumption by almost half without compromising safety or comfort. Next slide, please. No matter how much energy is reduced, we still need it to run our business. That said, our priority is to buy clean, green electricity. And working with Smartest, all the electricity we buy and use in our buildings is 100% renewable certified electricity. And our consumption is matched to a mix of solar, wind, hydro generation. However, we are always looking for innovative ways to generate and provide good, clean, carbon-free energy, direct on site at point of use. You can see in Norwich, we started this journey back in 2016, where we installed roof-mounted solar. The project was a success. However, the impact was moderate, in both colleague engagement and impact, meaning that from the ground, you can't really see it on the roof. And the generation wasn't quite enough to actually take the building off grid. We were keen to expand our existing system to provide a greater proportion of energy supply from on-site renewable energy sources. So in collaboration with our technical partner, SmartestEnergy, designed and built a bespoke steel frame structure made from 100% recycled steel and manufactured locally to deliver about 600 kilowatts of solar. The focus was on retaining car parking capacity of the site whilst maximising the number of solar panels supported by the gull wing frame. The solar carport system utilises our 250 parking spaces to generate over 500,000 of kilowatt hours of electricity a year. This was a game changer and enabled us to take the building off grid for significant periods of the day and also highly engaged our colleagues across the business. We had a few hurdles to overcome. We had to build the carports whilst the car park and building were fully operational. Fortunately, the carport structure is a modular design which enabled a phased delivery. This minimised on-site disruption during the construction. We didn't want to pour any concrete, so Wren came up with a screw pile anchor system rather than use concrete foundations. This significantly reduced the cost, time, and carbon emissions of the installation. The solution has the additional benefit of being relatively easy to relocate if required, and it leaves very little trace on the landscape, which pleased the planners. Grid connection issues were a problem. We could not export fully and had to curtail surplus generation when the building and agreed export limit was reached. We also had to install CCTV cameras underneath the canopies. Well, as you can see, we made it work, and 57% of the power required to run the call centre came from the Norfolk sunshine. Next slide, please. So how do you measure or test net zero? We have looked at many ways, including CREM, UK Green Buildings Council, and Better Buildings Partnership. And as you can see on the screen, our EPC performance during and after our interventions has significantly improved. We moved the dial from G to A+ net zero performance, and now we just need to do it to the rest of our buildings. Next slide, please. So the success of Norwich moved our attention to Aviva Perth. The building is a 5-storey Grade A listed building, and it's set in the beautiful Perthshire landscape. In terms of energy, it's one of our most energy-intensive buildings within the global portfolio, but one of the biggest opportunities to act now on climate change. Therefore, and assisted by the Scottish Government's LCITP programme, and again working collaboratively with SmartestEnergy, we developed a low-carbon hub, delivering the largest combined application of solar carport, battery energy storage, and EV charging infrastructure in the UK. The project was exciting because it's an innovative combination of technologies that can be scaled up and down. The backbone of the system is the 1.8 megawatt Tesla power pack, and with SmartestEnergy intelligently manages power flows between the solar, the office, the grid, and the EV chargers. The battery is capable of running the building for at least 5 hours a day, and this is when the building is fully occupied and all the plant and equipment is running. The storage is excellent for times when solar generation peaks and the building is fully satisfied, as it can mop up and store the generation for later use. The storage provides benefit by exporting when the grid requires energy and can import from the grid when surplus energy is available. And it doesn't stop there. As part of the project, we installed 50 EV charge points, some EV chargers as big as 22 kilowatts. And the infrastructure allows all 50 electric vehicles to charge simultaneously and keeps the lights on in our building and probably also Perth City as well. The project forms the cornerstone of our ambitious drive to take the office off-grid and provides just over a quarter of the normal annual energy demand. The next stage for Perth is to decarbonise the heat network, where we already have a digital twin which simulates and tests new heat sources that come onto the market, bit of a test bed. And we are still looking at options to install a 900 kilowatt wind turbine and looking at things like triple glazing, but I'll leave that and all the other ideas that we've got for the building for another day, because I really don't want to outstay my welcome. So happy to take questions. Or thank you.
Any questions? Oh. I keep doing that, walking up when the start, so sorry. But any questions from the audience? Happy to walk around and yeah. Okay.
How much did it cost to do what you did to Norwich? And how long did it take to do what you estimated to how long it actually was put in place?
Well, the cost. I mean, it's hard to say the actual figure, this sort of situation. But I mean, the paybacks, and what I tried to get across as well in our talks, because we look at it as a whole. So where we can actually save energy, that helps fund, you know, some of the bigger projects as well.
Yeah.
In abuse, and I think paybacks, you know, the solar carport in its own right was probably around about 9 years for us. Because we've got the luxury that we are the end user, you know, so it's anything we save, it saves us directly. And I think one of the problems that we have, we're very conservative, obviously being an insurance company as well, where, you know, we look at energy costs today, base the business case on today, but as we're all seeing, you know, energy costs going up, you know, pass-through charges going up as well. So it's
obviously for another company in a similar situation, that looks very expensive. And one of the biggest issues is probably getting the right people to install all these systems.
Yeah.
And it would be good to get an engagement of how you guys manage that, because just that side of things is probably the most difficult, right?
Yeah.
That you might have found, just getting the right contractors in to do the right thing.
It did. And also, but we had a big input into the design. You know, and there were some decisions. I mean, it's interesting. You see carports, and you know, I mean, the one in Norwich actually got switched on back in 2019, and you know, at the time we had to make decisions whether we put guttering on it. You know, but we kept it, and also if you wanted to cover the underneath, but we wanted to keep it open so that you could actually see the panels, and there is a gap between the panels for expansion. So our colleagues, if you park underneath, you will get water, but all that extra stuff adds cost. You know, we wanted to actually make it as cost effective as we could, and we also wanted to make it engaging so that, you know, our colleagues coming to site, they could actually see it as well. So, you know, it was a double whammy for us.
Lee, in terms of whether it's Perth or Horizon, what was the biggest hurdle or obstacle you had, and how did you get over it?
I think the biggest hurdle is always the grid connection. You know, it was really unfortunate because the systems have to be sized so much bigger than your maximum demand, because obviously you've got the shoulder periods of the day where generation is going to be low. And our ambition is to really sort of take the site off grid. So we wanted them to be bigger, but then it's what do you do with that extra energy? And at the time, unfortunately, with Norwich, you know, our export was limited. So we had to curtail down by turning down the inverters, you know, to stop that. With Perth, it's great. We've got the battery there, so that can actually soak up all that extra generation. But I think it's always trying to get these things connected to the grid. And it's you know, it adds risk, adds time and complexity as well.
You mentioned in your 46% saving, 3 factors to it. Down about that. I would imagine that they're negligible by comparison.
Yeah, I mean, we do. I mean, it's over time as well. So I think, you know, the first thing that we've done is really looking at where we're using energy in that building, and it's looking at the base load, and it's looking at, you know, even, you know, that's being a call center. You know, it was operational from 7 o'clock in the morning till probably 11 o'clock at night. But then it's looking at the time in between and seeing where that waste is. And I think we really did make some good wins on switching things off, you know, trimming things down. But then you introduce lighting, you're introducing so many different things. Now sub-metering is great, but it doesn't go down to the finer detail. So it's hard, you know, hard to do that. And then you've got the outside air temperatures, you've got the climate change. You know, we've tried to use degree day data, you know, to iron out where they are. But I think we throw everything at it and we look at the end result. And yeah, it normally does better than what we expect.
Any other questions? Yep.
Hi, Lee. You mentioned engagement a few times. How important is it? Why? And do you have any ways of measuring it?
We've tried a few things because we have a Eco Warrior scheme, we have a Green Champion scheme, and I think we did energy road shows as well. And so one measure was, you know, how many champions we can get to sign up, you know, and to come up with ideas. I think it's going to be a big thing for us going forward because obviously, you know, any of the changes that we've made that you've seen on the slides hasn't really affected, you know, comfort levels, but obviously going forward, you know, that might be different because of, you know, if we can run the offices warmer, you know, in the summer and cooler in the winter, then obviously there's going to be savings there. But the campaigns, I mean, luckily, I think from, you know, we've got a lot of engagement. You know, we have a Voice of Aviva survey as well, and the climate, you know, and especially over the last, well, you know, I think we was the first insurer to be carbon neutral back in 2016. I think we had a seat with the STGs, you know, so it's always been driven through the business. And I think, you know, the climate and carbon comes higher than the payback, the financial payback in some certain cases. So I think, you know, there's a good ethos there. So it's an easy audience to talk to.
Question over here. Sorry.
Thanks. Dan from Origami. I'm just wondering about the battery storage system and your business case around that. How much of the business case is purely around servicing the site versus monetizing the battery and, you know, the revenue stack that you get from that? You know, how did you make that decision and what's the thought process behind that?
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, it was more, the business case was more on servicing the site. You know, again, I think because especially if we get a wind turbine as well, because one of the biggest risks that we're going to have is that the wind blows at night, at the weekends when we're not in the office. So we need to sort of capture that and reuse it. But obviously, we also wanted to actually, you know, and it's hard to calculate the numbers, but you know, by taking energy off the grid when there is a surplus of wind at night, you know, then there's benefit, and taking our site off grid, you know, through the red charges as well to stop the gas power stations firing up. You know, that was more the idea. And I know there is a value to that, but we didn't actually, because it was so hard and complicated to actually calculate. And also we didn't have the experience, you know, in looking at it. We saw some numbers, but we purposely didn't put it into the business case. So that's just benefit. But again, anything we can save, we put back in.
Any other questions? Yeah, we got time for one more. So over.
Hi, Lee.
Hi.
Yeah, the 50 EV charge points for 342 spaces seems pretty good. It's like a good coverage.
Yep.
Like, if maybe just some advice for other businesses, because I deal a lot with businesses looking at introducing this infrastructure and they're wondering how many bays that they should enable. Did you do something internally to try and work out the appetite for charging? Were there any surveys or any sort of advice that you'd have for businesses that are trying to work out what they need, how many points they need to enable?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because again, we did survey our colleagues. The uptake of EVs, you know, at the minute is quite low still. So it's kind of, with the Perth one, it does stand out a little bit with the 50, but it was kind of a build it and they will come, you know, it's getting the infrastructure ready. I think, you know, we've always had EV charge points in our other locations around the country. And we're only getting to a certain point now in Norwich where they're starting to creak a little bit. We need more, but then it's the infrastructure, getting more connected to them. So it's, I think over the years, the demand is going to be there more so, but it's, yeah, I think they're quite privileged in Perth. But then, you know, 3-4 years time, everybody up there could have an EV potentially. So, and that could cause us issues there to add more.